My mom was diagnosed with a lesser known type of dementia called frontotemporal dementia. She was 62. FTD, frontotemporal dementia, is often misdiagnosed because it's a lesser known type of dementia, but it is the most common type of dementia for anyone under the age of 65. And so my husband and I decided to have mom come out to Oregon to live with us. And it turned out it was her final 2 years that we were with her. They talk about all these little tiny goodbyes and tiny griefs, little pinpricks along the way where the person you know and love is not the same person that's in front of you. With FTD, it's different than Alzheimer's. So many people understand Alzheimer's as memory loss. And FTD is, she also was losing a lot of elements of her personality.
Welcome to Linda's Corner, where we bring more hope, healing, and happiness to the world. My name is Linda Bjork, and today we're going to be talking about caring for a loved one with dementia. I'm delighted to welcome Katie Prentice. Katie is an award-winning actress and filmmaker. She is currently working on a feature film called Wake Up Maggie, which is a love letter to her mom. You can reach Katie at her website, katieprentice.com, and I'll include that link in the show notes. Welcome, Katie. I'm so glad that you could join with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Thank you. Would you mind sharing your story about the slow goodbye that you had with your mother?
Absolutely. My mom was diagnosed with a lesser known type of dementia called frontotemporal dementia. She was 62 when she was diagnosed, but we're pretty sure she probably had it in her 50s. FTD, frontotemporal dementia, is often misdiagnosed and often takes an average of 3.5 years to get an accurate diagnosis because it's a lesser known type of dementia, but it is the most common type of dementia for anyone under the age of 65. So my siblings and I all had younger kids. And right when, you love having your mom come, grandma comes and plays with them and hangs out and helps so much was going wrong with my mom. So we were essentially catapulted into caregiving with her. My siblings and my mom were living in Georgia at the time, and I live in Oregon. And when we first realized something was off with mom, it was that she was having weird delusions. And so we thought maybe something was up with her medications, or we didn't know. We just were trying to find an explanation. The first doctor we went to said she had a delusional disorder and that she needed to not drive anymore and not live alone. And that was like immediate. So my sister had her come and live with them, and that turned into 2 years. And as mom's degenerative disease progressed, my sister and her husband were kind of at their end in caregiving and what they felt like they were capable of. And so my husband and I decided to have mom come out to Oregon to live with us. And it turned out it was her final 2 years that we were with her, that we had her here with us in Oregon. So you asked about the slow goodbye, and I'm taking a long wind up to get there. But, with FTD, it's different than Alzheimer's. So many people understand Alzheimer's as memory loss. And there's a lot of different variants with FTD, but for my mom, she had primary progressive aphasia. So that meant she was losing her ability to speak. She also was losing a lot of elements of her personality. She was losing compulsion control. So they talk about all these little tiny goodbyes and tiny griefs, little pinpricks along the way where the person you know and love is not the same person that's in front of you. And it's so hard to know what they understand and what they're able to comprehend and what they remember and what they recognize. But yeah, it was just a journey of a lot of grief along the way, losing mom along the way before we finally lost her.
Wow. And you know, this is a different type than I was expecting. It's not something that I'm familiar with. And
Mhm.
as you're describing the symptoms, I was surprised.
Yes,
I wouldn't think of the delusions of losing your ability to speak, of losing your personality, that slow erasing
yes,
of this person that you know. And
yes.
and that would be challenging and confusing.
Mm,
I can imagine why people would misdiagnose, misunderstand, because it's not what we're expecting and so young. I
yes.
mean, that's not something you would expect at all.
No, no, it's super confusing. It often gets misdiagnosed as depression, menopause, alcoholism, um, because sometimes like the first signs are personality shifts or like isolating, or, there's a behavioral variant where people act in very erratic ways, perhaps do things that are really inappropriate all of a sudden, and so people get confused. I know a lot of people with FTD who have gotten arrested multiple times because they have behavioral issues that are misunderstood and miscomprehended. So it's a very confusing disease, but it's also why it's so important that we raise awareness and show this other form of dementia that people know less about. We need research, and we need support and hopefully a cure.
Wouldn't that be lovely?
Yeah.
First, I just want to express my admiration
Mhm.
for you bringing your mother into your home and living with that 24/7 while while she changed and
Yeah.
you were there for her. And that is so beautiful. That
Mhm.
is an honor to who your mother really is, not just that decline at the end.
Mhm.
And you have used this experience to really help people raise awareness with your skill set, your talents, your abilities. You created that short film
Mhm.
called Front Porches. Would you like to tell us just a little bit about that? I mean, I think that film is a really effective way to help people be able to experience in a safe way
Yes.
what it is that you're going through.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. I can share about that. My process we lost mom in 2016, and I made my first short film in 2020 from Porches. And I was, in some ways, I think writing and filmmaking can feel selfish. It's like when you're participating in an art form, it's like, oh, this will be really healing for me because I get to process the way I felt or how confusing it was. But it was such a cool opportunity for me to be able to share. In that film, I really shared kind of the beginning confusing parts of watching someone's cognitive abilities decline. So that film is like I said, we made it right in the middle of the pandemic, with a very small cast and crew. And I set it within the context of two neighbors, a relationship between two women who had become like mother and daughter to each other just because they lived next door to each other, which felt important to comment on in that time of our lives, especially. But yeah, that short film just shows that confusion of something is going on and I don't know what it is. And it's scary because you're going to need support and have to jump in. And it's often, when you get catapulted into caregiving like that, it's often, well, in my experience, it's when you feel like you need caregiving, you need support. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm going to be caring for this other person that I love, in a very profound way. So, yeah, so making that film was a really, um, it was such a great experience for me to be able to process some of those things and show parts of it that people don't often talk about. They often talk about the later stages.
Yes. And I think I imagine that's when a lot of the confusion takes place, is at the beginning.
Yeah.
So you talked about it being selfish as kind of this therapy, but I
Mhm.
think really what it is it's a win-win.
It is.
And I have no problem with win-win.
Mhm.
If something that we are helping pay it forward also benefits us, that's awesome. So well done. And you did very well with that film and won lots of awards. So congratulations for that.
Thank
And
you.
now you're going to go a little bigger. Can you tell me a little bit about how Maggie, this story is going to be different? Is it going to be kind of the same, only expanded, or totally
Yes.
different, or
It's both. It's totally different, but it's based in the same truth of the experience. So the context of Front Porches was that it was two neighbors that felt like mother-daughter. Wake Up Maggie is a story about two sisters. Maggie is the older sister, and she and Jane are estranged from one another. And Maggie is that classic midlife woman who is trying to hold her life so tightly together, how we try to grasp and control things that we can't always control, whether it be our marriages, our finances, our children. Maggie's got it all tightly held until Jane finds herself into some legal trouble. Maggie has to decide whether she enters in or not. When she does, she realizes so much more is going on in Jane's life and sees some scary signs, and then ultimately gets the diagnosis with Jane, her younger sister. So, Wake Up Maggie is very specific in that it's highlighting frontotemporal dementia, and it's a younger person. Jane is in her 40s. Um, Also, it's set in the context of a sister story, but it's very much about caregiving and midlife, and how I really latched on to a quote from Brene Brown where she talks about how midlife, she views midlife less as a crisis and more as an unraveling.
mm,
I love that idea of midlife unraveling us. And sometimes when we think of the word unraveled, it sounds bad. But I think of it almost as like peeling back the layers that do not serve us anymore. So the unraveling of midlife is, if for me in my own personal experience, if we let the grief and the difficulties that we endure in life unravel us to a more raw and honest place, it can align us to what's important. It can make us value, spending time on. I always say now, I'm like, I want to live and love as big as I can in life. And that's what I think my own personal unraveling has done. And in Maggie's journey, it's her moving from tightly controlling everything to being unraveled into acceptance and love in her life. So the journey is going to be so beautiful watching her. I think anyone who, I really feel like this movie is for everyone. It's for the midlife journey. It's for anyone who understands caregiving, even if it's as simple as like taking care of a pet or a child, all the way to people who have experienced, cognitive diseases or decline in someone they love, or even in their own diagnosis. So I cannot wait to get this movie on screens and in front of people.
oh, I am looking forward to seeing it. It sounds absolutely beautiful.
Thank
I
you.
love what you've described as this unraveling, because that is really a message that I hear over and over again in the way that you kind of help to fine tune what that means in peeling back what does not serve us
Mm,
so that we can find what does.
Mm.
We have an opportunity in our life to do that and to make those changes. What a beautiful thing to express and to highlight. With this experience that you had with your mother, do you feel like it unraveled you? How did that change you?
Yeah. Oof. Yeah. The what feels like trauma and crisis of watching someone you love move into more of what feels like a shell of them. You know, they're in there, but they're not able to interact with you or be with you in the way that you need. It unraveled me in the way, I thought I would be able to love and caregive for her, and then seeing my own failings and dealing with my own guilt over the ways I didn't show up for her, which I can also process through filmmaking, which I love. But it also unraveled me into having to accept what I cannot control and focusing my life on what I can control. So I do believe deeply that acceptance is our path to peace, and knowing what we can't control and accepting that with as much grace as we possibly can. But also, we can activate and move into things we can control. And that's why I feel so grateful to be able to do this work, to make this movie, because it is something I can control. It's not sort of, it's something I can create to feel like positive change, to feel like healing and hopeful, even despite the grief and things that we face in life. So, yeah. So, yes, my mom, experiencing what I went through with my mom unraveled me in a lot of deep ways. But I think ultimately it was such a gift to my identity and who I am and how I want to live the second half of my life.
That is absolutely beautiful. And you brought up some really important things about caregiving, things that often come up. And one is that feeling of guilt, like I didn't do enough. And I have a friend who recently lost her father. And as she was going through counseling, the counselor said, let's not use the word guilt. Let's use the word regret.
Mm,
You didn't do anything wrong.
mm,
It's not that you weren't enough. It's perhaps you wish things had been different. And
yes.
just reframing our thinking a little bit because you're giving so much, but none of us are perfect, which means even our caregiving at our best is not going to be perfect. So I'm grateful you brought that up. It kind of adds insult to injury, where it's like I'm putting my life, I'm putting everything on hold because I love this person and I'm trying to care for him. But I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I'm frustrated, I'm overwhelmed, and I can't do everything. And, let's be compassionate with ourselves. I mean, we're being compassionate with the person that we're caring for. Can we also be compassionate for the caregiver?
Yes. It's so important. I think what you're saying is so important. And that's the journey, is like learning how to be gentle with ourselves and seeing us, reflecting back and acknowledging what we did give, acknowledging how much we gave and how much we loved. For me, there's two things. One is my mom, I feel like she just had that caregiver personality. And so every time I would feel overwhelmed in being her caregiver, I would think, gosh, she would do this so well. She would do this so well. But I also knew that she would be the first person to comfort me and to soothe me and to like say I was doing enough and it's okay. So that was such a huge comfort to me. But I also heard someone say that our regret is just another form of love, how we love that person. And it's just like you were saying, it's like, of course, it's indicating that we wanted more, that we wanted to love them well. And that even that desire is communicating so much love. So yeah, so I love the reframing um, guilt into regret, but even regret into love.
Mm, I like that. I appreciate that. That's an excellent clarification. And I loved how you put it into acceptance. Acceptance is where peace lies. And so, if we can get to that place. Now, in addition to everything that you've gone through, I imagine there's a little bit of fear in there thinking, gosh, is this genetic? Is this something that might happen to me? So, how do you live with that kind of a thought?
Mm. Thank you for asking that. Um, I think, to be honest, when my mom was going through her dementia, her FTD diagnosis, I did a really lot of I did a lot of mental work to form a lot of denial around any possibility that I might get it. I think it has to be common to fear dying in the way you see someone you love die. It has to be, because it's so hard to watch that then it becomes a scary thing. So I definitely had some just general fear of getting some type of dementia as I grow older. But then what happened as time went on and I learned more about FTD, I learned that there is a genetic component to some FTD diagnosis. So they found in some of the research they've done, found certain gene links. I again was like, well, it's probably not us, probably not us. And then, unfortunately, my uncle, my mom's brother, was also diagnosed with FTD in recent years, which is just so heartbreaking watching my aunt care for him, um, going through the same thing as my mom did. Right beside that, it's so triggering with fear for me because it feels that much closer that it probably is genetic and there is a chance of us having that gene. And I have 4 children. And so thinking about passing that gene on, it's terrifying. And as I was writing Wake Up Maggie, I've been working on this for 2.5 years now. As I was writing it, it's facing all of those things. It's putting myself in that space of grief, remembering what it was like with mom. You know, telling stories. Yes, it's fiction, but it's very true. And I think in those days, I would have just like, I'm like, wow, this is my biggest fear is getting this, because every time I couldn't get a word out or like I would do something odd, I'm like, oh, I probably have it. I probably have it. And so I think the thing that is helpful about fear, again, it's an opportunity. If we let it be, where I was like, I'm either going to let this thing traumatize me and hover over my shoulder, or I'm going to turn and face it. And so I remember saying to myself, okay, what if you do have it? You can get genetically tested, by the way. I just want to put that out there. And getting genetically tested really helps advance research, whether you find the results or not. So if anyone's listening and they find that, might be something they want to do, I highly encourage it. And it is something I'm definitely considering doing myself. However, for this space and time that I'm in, I was thinking, okay, what if I have this disease? What would I do differently with my life if you knew for sure that you had FTD in your future? And I had such a moment of clarity in that I knew I would make this movie Wake Up Maggie. I would make this movie. I would love my family and my friends, and I would spend time being present and doing what's important to me. And, of course, like make healthy choices, all of those things, which I kind of am already on that path anyway. But so it was just like, oh, okay. Like I'm contributing to this by making this movie, and I'm going to live my life to its fullest. I'm going to love people as big as I can. And it just, that in that moment of facing my fear, this movie became not just like a creative wonderful, beautiful, fun project that I get to make, but it became my calling. And the alignment that I felt in those self questioning and reflection, I was like, this is happening. Like, there's no question about whether it's going to happen. It's going to be incredible. It's going to be my contribution. I hope that my life is very long, and I hope I get to make so many movies after this one. But no matter what, I'm going to contribute in this way to this realm of the world. And that feels so good, despite the fear or the reality of whether this could be in my gene pool.
Wow. I just want to stand up and cheer. How beautiful. I love that. Thank you for sharing. And you have taken something very real, a very real concern, and recognized and faced that fear. And instead of panicking about the parts you can't control, you've turned it and said, but what can I do? What can I control? That live like you were dying. My life matters. This time, right here, right now. What I'm doing matters. What matters to me?
Yeah.
My love. My love. I am going to love the people around me, and I'm going to love big. And I'm going to do something that matters to me and that brings me joy.
Yeah.
And for you, it is that creating of this new movie. That is, I think, the most beautiful advice that you could share with anyone. There are so many unknowns in our lives that we can panic about and feel overwhelmed and be just paralyzed by fear. Or we can say, well, what can I do right here, right now? What brings me joy? What brings me fulfillment? What gives meaning and purpose to my life? Well, let's do that. And then if my life is short, it's been a meaningful, purposeful, loving life. And if my life is long, awesome. It's going to be a meaningful, purposeful, loving life.
Mm.
Oh, Katie, wow.
I love that. Thank you so much. Yes, it's like none of us are guaranteed tomorrow. It's just, it's like if we're afraid or if we even have a diagnosis, let it be the gift that ushers you into the biggest presence, the biggest love. Yeah, it's just, yeah.
What a beautiful message you've shared today. Is there anything else you want to make sure that we cover before we close today?
I just appreciate so much getting to share with you and you listening in such a beautiful, present way, Linda. Um, I am, like I said, I am beyond thrilled to do this work. If anyone is listening and wants to follow along, we're at wakeupmaggiemovie.com. And we right now are in the development stage. We'll get into pre-production in the late fall, winter, and we're planning to shoot a February 2025. So we're still gathering all the support and all the audience that we can as we prepare to launch. And we'd just love to have anyone join us.
Well, thank you. That is so beautiful. And thank you for visiting with me today.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor.
In closing, I'd like to share a quote by Tia Walker. She said, "Caregiving often calls us to lean into love we didn't know was possible."
Mm.
Today, I want to honor and thank all of the caregivers who are listening. What you're doing matters. See you next time on Linda's Corner.
Thanks for listening. Please share and subscribe to help us reach new listeners. And if you'd like to heal your life from the inside out, there is a free video series at hopeforhealingfoundation.org. Just click on the free stuff tab. I also invite you to grab a copy of one of my books, like Crushed, A Journey Through Depression, and You Got This, an action plan to calm fear, anxiety, worry, and stress. See you next time on Linda's Corner.